Good morning, everyone. Welcome. It's FPC Radio Live, and no, your eyes are not deceiving you. It is Wednesday, and we are here doing a brand new episode of FPC Radio Live, and for good reason, John. Yesterday, we had the most active trade deadline day in the NFL. We had 10 trades completed, and that is not including the several big trades we saw prior to that, including Christian McCaffrey, including some other moves that were made, obviously days ahead of the deadline. But yesterday was fairly active and not surprising. And I know this might surprise some people. Packers did nothing, and that really I don't think just surprises either of us, to be honest with you.
Not at all. And this has been an issue for years with the Packers. And again, I go back to the fact that they don't have an owner, which is kind of a cool thing, right? I mean, they're owned by the shareholders, who could be you or I. Next time they become public, we can go ahead and buy a share.
Speak for yourself.
Well, it's not anything other than the paper it's printed on, but it's kind of a nice Christmas gift, but they raise a lot of money. Mark Murphy's the president. Brian Gutekunst is the general manager, so they don't have to answer to anyone. Mark Murphy, as the president, serves as kind of the owner, and he's held accountable by the board of directors, whatever. It's just a different setup than anywhere else, and it's kind of cool. But when it comes to situations like this, it's not cool because there's no one who puts their foot down and says, go get something to help my quarterback. Like that just doesn't exist where, whether it's Jerry Jones in Dallas or Robert Kraft in New England, who neither team really did anything yesterday, but I'm just using them as powerful owners, could say, look, go all in. I want to get to the playoffs. I'm in my 80s, whatever. They don't have that with the Packers, so they just sat idly. And again, your quarterback's making $51 million a year, but I'm sure you could have found a way to bring in some sort of veteran wide receiver to help the guy out.
Well, and look, I mean, we saw Chase Claypool get moved for, I believe it was a 4th-round pick. I'm trying to pull up all the official stats. There's so much going on yesterday, it's hard to keep track. But yeah, I mean, look, obviously, Packers fans were pining for the big wide receiver move. And I think we both agree that they probably should have made that move because this is a team that is greatly limited at that position. On the flip side, another team that we talk about to exhaustion is the Tampa Bay Bucks. And I maintained prior to that I don't think they necessarily needed to make a move because I think they have perhaps maybe a move on defense because of the loss of Shaquille Barrett. But the reality of it is they're getting secondary guys back and they have the players on offense to make this work. They just got to find the formula. So I'm not necessarily concerned that the Bucks didn't make a move, but if you're a Packers fan, I do think that a move should have been done. Now, look, they could still be in the Odell Beckham Jr. race, and that's certainly within the realm of possibilities because he's a free agent. He's not going to cost you anything but money. And, it could be appealing for him to come and play with Aaron Rodgers. The only problem is it going to be too little too late by the time he gets on board? Because, well, right now the Vikings, who made a pretty big deal, and I like this move a lot. And I actually thought if there was one move that Tampa could have made, it could have potentially been to go get this guy. I thought the Vikings, they might, I don't want to say they won the trade deadline, but if you're going to ask me for an immediate knee-jerk reaction as to who I thought might have made the best just yesterday, might have been the Vikings.
Yeah, the Vikings or the Dolphins getting Bradley Chubb and edge rusher as well because they could certainly use that, especially when you get another game against Josh Allen coming up in several weeks. So I think those are the two teams that haven't had a lot of success recently, so they're all in. I mean, TJ Hawkinson's a top 5 tight end, and Detroit stupid enough to trade him within the division, which is always kind of a strange thing because you get to see him twice a year. But that's going to upgrade that offense. You put him in with Justin Jefferson, Dalvin Cook, Adam Thielen. A lot of toys there for Kirk Cousins, and their defense has stepped up this year as well. They're going to run away with that division. Well, they would have to collapse not to win that division.
Well, we talk about the 49ers bringing in Christian McCaffrey for Jimmy G protection, and I keep saying not path protection. We're talking about just protecting him from himself. And I feel like this is what the Vikings are doing with Kirk Cousins. And I think Kirk Cousins is probably a better quarterback than Jimmy Garoppolo. Would you agree with that?
Oh, without question.
Yeah.
Simply because he's durable. I mean, he shows up every week. That's availability is so important. That's a big thing. I'm not crazy about either guy, but you and I, Ian, are both we're quarterback snobs at this point. It's like Brady, Rodgers, and everybody else isn't really good.
I talk about my quarterbacks with my pinky up in the air like I'm sipping tea,
right.
As an elite.
Yeah.
A 1920s elite, not like a current elite.
Right.
I'm talking about like the elite of the elite back in the day.
Slight British accent.
Yeah. And you go and sip brandy and smoke cigars. Basically, I'm describing the plot of Titanic right now. That's the image I have in my head, sitting up in first class. But yeah, I think, beyond just the health, I do think Kirk Cousins is a better quarterback than Jimmy Garoppolo. I think he's capable of doing more. But they both have these like fatal flaws. Kurt obviously is in prime time, and I guess you can say the same about Jimmy, although again, he's brought his team to the Super Bowl and he was, on the cusp of going back again. So I can't really knock him for that. But in the same way that I think the 49ers almost idiot-proofed the offense for Jimmy Garoppolo, I think Minnesota's doing the same thing because, to your point, they've identified a very unique opportunity, one that they really haven't had, even in years that they've won the division in recent years. It was never such a one-sided affair. And right now they have an opportunity to just absolutely run away with it by, 3/4 of the way through the season because they got better. And Green Bay, again, just didn't do anything. And I don't think either of us believe that they were good enough before Minnesota made that move to catch them. I think it's impossible now because TJ Hawkinson is a guy that can he's a guy that can change how you run your offense because of how big he is, and he's in more of a mold of a traditional tight end where he can add some help blocking and everything like that. So I was definitely very impressed with what we saw from the Vikings in terms of what they did at the trade deadline.
And Cousins loves throwing the tight ends. We know he had good rapport with Kyle Rudolph for several years. Irv Smith has been a disappointment, a former first-round pick out of Alabama, but now you bring in Hawkinson, who was a top 10 pick out of Iowa. Everybody loves those Iowa tight ends, right? Because George Hill's also an Iowa, and they block because you have to with Iowa because you run quite a bit on that offense. So no, this is a great move for Minnesota. And again, what's their ceiling? Maybe the number 2 seed because again they lose the tiebreaker to Philadelphia because Philadelphia beat them. So that means you're going to have to play the first weekend, and you're probably playing, I don't know, maybe the Giants or Dallas or whoever in the first round, and those teams could go in and upset them. I mean, I don't think anybody would be shocked if Minnesota lost on weekend number 1 of the playoffs, but at least they're doing what they have to do to try to be more of a player in the NFC.
Well, I think, my comments when it comes to the Minnesota Vikings are strictly regular season. So I think they improved themselves greatly for the regular season. When it comes to playoffs, I can't, as much as I say they idiot proofed the offense for Kirk Cousins, you're still not going to find me putting any money on him to win a primetime game until I see it. You know what I mean? Until he can show up when the lights are brightest. I can't fully commit to that. So from a regular season, march towards the playoffs, division hopeful, great move for Minnesota. We'll see what happens, when it comes down to ultimately, where they're going to land in the playoffs. Are they going to be one and done? Are they going to make it to the NFC Championship game? We'll find out. So you already mentioned Miami, and if you're going to ask me what was the second most improved team after yesterday, and we're talking kind of specifically yesterday because I know Christian McCaffrey happened a couple weeks ago, but making the move for Bradley Chubb at a fairly reasonable price too. You talk about the Dolphins, and I think how good they can be with Tua. They have an elite wide receiver, and look, we're gonna in just a few minutes give our top 5 wide receivers currently in the league, and I wouldn't be shocked if one of those Miami Dolphins wide receivers lands on both of our lists. But this offense can be deadly, and now they add another dynamic player on defense where, if they had the defense from 2 years ago under Brian Flores, this team might be the best team in football. They're starting to get that back a little bit. They're not quite to that level, but adding a guy like Bradley Chubb is a game changer because we know how important pass rushers are, and specifically, John, how important they are to stopping a team like Kansas City.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially if you face Kansas City in round 1 or round 2 of the playoffs. That's a real possibility because I would think Kansas City will be the 2 seed. Miami's not going to win the division, so they'll be either the 5, 6, or 7. So somewhere along the line, you're going to have to probably face Kansas City, if not Buffalo as well. So you need that pass rush to try to get 2 great quarterbacks. Absolutely. And Miami decided that they're going to go all in on this, and they see Tua has really stepped up as a quarterback this year. They gave him the weapons, but they had to address that side of the football on defense to try to, be for real. Look, Miami's 5-1 in games he started this year, and the one loss came against Cincinnati when he was, concussed midway through that game, and they were still in that game. So he's almost a sneaky MVP candidate. I wouldn't put him up there quite yet, but the man is leading the league in passer rating and QBR, which is a pretty good combination to lead the league in. I still wouldn't put him up there as an MVP candidate, but as a sneaky one, maybe. But so good for Miami going all in and getting an impact player like Bradley Chubb.
Yeah, and look, I mean, it's impressive, and we both kind of, or at least me specifically, I've certainly upped my opinion of Tua over the course of the season, both when he's been on the field and when he hasn't, in the difference in the two, and not just. Obviously, we talked about getting those wide receivers, and that helps. But again, if we're gonna hold Tua back for having these wide receivers, then again, what was Patrick Mahomes? You know what I mean? It's not like they went out and got their receivers; they already had them. So it's like it's not meant to diminish what their success is. It's just enhancing it. And I think, as we've seen before, I mean, you can't just throw a quarterback in there and just expect success because you have talent around you. You still have to make good decisions and throw the ball well. You can't just go through the motions just because you have talent around you. So, one more thing, I wasn't surprised at all that Kansas City didn't make a move. And I know the Chiefs fans were clamoring for, one of the receivers, Brandon Cooks or Brian Burns or Bradley Chubb or one of those guys. And we kind of talked about it. I believe we talked about it. Maybe I'm confusing my shows that I've done, but I have mentioned that I saw that, or I feel that like teams like Kansas City, I mean, the elite franchises in this league, they don't make moves like that. They don't go over the top because these are the type of moves that, franchises that are desperate make. And, it's really a gamble, and a team like Kansas City, first of all, who they hold, they're hosting the draft. First of all, they're not going to be getting rid of their first round pick when they're supposed to have the draft at their home, unless it's an absolute no brainer. So they're not going to overpay for a trade deadline deal when, I mean, realistically, they have a team that's good enough to go all the way. Sure. Do I think they're the best team in the AFC right now? No, but that doesn't mean that they can't ultimately win the Super Bowl. So good for Kansas City, not kind of going, getting out of control and going and making a move for whoever, you know what I mean? And it doesn't mean because the Pittsburgh traded Chase Claypool to the Chicago Bears for a 4th round pick, it doesn't mean they were going to do that to an AFC division rival. You know what I mean? It just doesn't necessarily work out that way. So I think from a Kansas City standpoint, I think they did the wise thing and didn't get rid of assets because, they're a team that they're not just building for now, right this moment. This is a team that expects to compete much like the Patriots for the next 10 or 15 years. And you don't do that by just throwing away assets at the trade deadline. So I was definitely impressed, or at least if I was a Chiefs fan, I'd be very satisfied with them not kind of going over the top and doing anything ridiculous.
And they had already added Kadarius Toney, who's a talent who didn't produce with the Giants.
Those are
right?
exactly the type of moves that great franchises make. I mean, the Patriots would do that all the time. You would be like, oh, they got to go out and get so-and-so, and then they go out and, you know what I mean, get the last person on the list, but it ended up working out. Like, do you think Aqib Talib was – no one really – they're like, oh, well, okay, whatever, it's Aqib Talib. No one was talking about that. Well, he came in his first game, had a pick 6, and really, if you think about it, his acquisition was the root of the Patriots' change over that second part of that dynasty when it comes to the secondary, because it went from Aqib Talib to obviously Darrelle Revis, Malcolm Butler, so on and so forth. So so I liked the moves from Kansas City going out and getting Tony. Doesn't mean it's going to work. It could be an epic failure, but it didn't cost him much.
No, it was a really good move. He's only 23 years old. He's a talent. You put him in with Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, maybe you get more out of him. Juju Smith-Schuster, Marquez Valdes-Scantling have both been productive this year as new acquisitions. You've got Travis Kelce, who is, a top 10 weapon in the NFL. You got Patrick Mahomes. They can run the football as well. They're in good shape. They're a well-run organization, so they don't have to panic. Or they're one of the teams that are going to be rumored to OBJ, who probably won't come back till December. And I'm thinking he's going to a place where he can Super Bowl and play with an elite quarterback, and certainly Kansas City fits that description.
Yeah, absolutely. So, that will be the next, I guess, thing to monitor is like who's going to sign Odell Beckham Jr. The Packers, like I said, could be a possibility, but by the time he's healthy, John, which might be a few weeks from now, but that might even be too late for the Packers. So
they could be 4-7 by the time he's ready to come back, and he's not going to Green Bay to a 4-7 team. I don't care how much he respects Aaron Rodgers. He may not even go to Tampa. I mean, although they're going to be in it because of the division they play in, I would think Buffalo, Kansas City would be the two spots that he's going to look at.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I would say Buffalo, Kansas City. I don't know how much the Rams nostalgia, but they're not a good team right now. I would kind of throw Tampa Bay in the mix. I mean, I think it really depends on Julio Jones's health. You know what I mean? If he gets shut down again, which is certainly a possibility, they might kind of turn their attention towards like, hey, maybe we do this. But to me, like I said, the root of the Bucks problems isn't personnel, it isn't injuries, it isn't this. It's coaching and scheme. It's philosophy. How do you attack each and every week? And that's a problem they have to solve before they try to grade whatever pieces they have on offense. So, all right, John. Speaking of wide receivers, and we've been talking about them for the last week or so, we're going to give our top 5 wide receivers, and I wonder. I feel like this could be a pretty mixed up list. I don't know. I mean, we might have the same 5 guys. We might have 3 of the same, 2 of the same. I'm not really sure. So it should be pretty interesting. And unlike, I guess, the quarterback position where I've spoken about this, where it's like I don't think it's necessarily that fluid, in terms of who's the best. I don't think it's a week to week or year to year thing. I think it's more or less, there's a lot that goes into it. Wide receiver might be a little bit different, although I do give the edge to what you've accomplished in the immediate past. Obviously last year and maybe the year before, or whatever. So also my number 5 wide receiver, right? And I know, times are tough right now. He's down a bit, and things aren't so rosy on the other side. But I got to put Davante Adams here because I don't think he's completely, just overnight lost this skill. I just think he's in a worse situation, and he's shown. I mean, just it's not so much that he's not doing what he's doing; it's just not as consistent. And I think a lot of that has to do with the offense and the quarterback that he's playing with. So I, for the life of me, put him off or leave him off this list yet. I mean, it's too soon to kind of backtrack on that. So number 5 for me is Davante.
What I did with this, Ian, is obviously Davante Adams and Cooper Kupp. Going into the season, we had them as the 2 best wide receivers in football. I still think they are. But for this exercise, I left them off the list. It's kind of almost like put them off to the side just for this because there's so many freaking good wide receivers in the NFL. You could have a top 5. I could have a top 5, and we could have completely different wide receivers. One receiver would be on both lists. That's how deep the position is. I mean, as I'm making this out, I'm like, oh my Lord, I'm forgetting this guy or this guy or this guy or this guy. So I did that with Davante and Cooper Kupp. I mean, look, I think they're both brilliant and whatever. I'm not holding anything against Davante because he left my man Aaron Rodgers, but he's still my favorite wide receiver in the league. But I just left him off for this exercise. I go with Jamar Chase with Cincinnati, and we saw how much Joe Burrow missed him the other night. Obviously, the pass rush was pretty solid for Cleveland against Cincinnati, but without Chase, that's Joe Burrow's security blanket. They have that great vibe from LSU. So I've got Jamar Chase, who to me feels a little bit like a younger version of Devontae Adams. He's just so strong on the field. He attacks the ball. He's got good hands. He can run after catch. He's a good-sized wide receiver. So I go with Jamar Chase at number 5.
Yeah, like right off the bat, we already are differing, and I'm right there with you. I mean, it was a long list of receivers that you're like, man, who do I leave off the list? But my number 4 for me is Stephon Diggs. I think his impact with Josh Allen coming to Buffalo has been understated, and I think maybe the excitement of his arrival is certainly long gone because he's been there for a while. So I think sometimes we forget about him. Like the other day, we were talking about this, and we were talking about all these wide receivers, and then you brought up Stephon Diggs. I was like, oh yeah, that's the one guy that was there was someone that I just wasn't thinking of, and it was driving me nuts. And he can still do it. I mean, he's again, for his size, you would think he wouldn't be as effective, but he is, and he's a guy who can make plays all over the field. So number 4 for me, Stephon Diggs.
Number 4 for me is DeAndre Hopkins, who a couple of years ago I thought he was the best wide receiver in football. And look, he hasn't really fallen. He's still great. He was suspended early in the season. You look at the numbers he put up in Houston, and really the only top-flight quarterback he ever had was Deshaun Watson. And he didn't play a lot with Deshaun Watson because he was eventually traded to Arizona back in 2019. So this is a guy who just puts up numbers with any quarterback. Kyler Murray's a good quarterback, not a great quarterback. That catch he made Sunday against Minnesota was beautiful. Just he snatched it with one hand. I've got DeAndre Hopkins as the 4th best wide receiver in football.
Yeah, and that's his thing. His hands are incredible. So, number 3 for me, and I could not, I couldn't keep him off the list. The guy won the Triple Crown last year, and I know it's a down year for him this year, down year for the entire I mean, that Rams team is they are not good in any aspect of the game. It's a surprising fall from grace. Not surprising. I think that the surprising part is how drastic of a fall it's been so far for the team. But for me, Cooper Kupp is still Cooper Kupp, and he might be banged up a little bit, but I just could not leave him off the list. Certainly after what he accomplished last year. So number 3, Cooper Kupp.
Number 3 for me is a guy I know you like a lot. He went from Tennessee to Philadelphia, went from Ryan Tannehill to Jalen Hurts. And look, Hurts is an MVP candidate. A.J. Brown, to me, is the 3rd best wide receiver in football, runs pristine routes, is so big and strong and physical. And the thing about A.J. Brown is so many of the wide receivers we think of as divas. It's like the official diva position of the NFL. A.J. Brown doesn't come across to me as a diva. He'll block. He'll take on tacklers. Just a sensational player. I have A.J. Brown at number 3.
And that's where I have my number 2 wide receiver is A.J. Brown. Again, talked about him. This is kind of what spurred the whole conversation about the wide receivers is this guy the best wide receiver in football? And I think he's very quickly climbed the ladder to get to that point. And he's almost there. He's knocking on the door. And for me, he's our number 2 wide receiver, my number 2 wide receiver this year, because again, it's just he does things, he does things all over the field. He's not just a one-trick pony, and I don't mean that insultingly. It's just some guys are deep threats and can do those great things, and other guys just kind of make plays all over the field, and I think A.J. Brown is that guy. So very easily for me, number 2, A.J. Brown.
Number 2 for me is someone who you had at number 4, Stephon Diggs. I think Stephon Diggs runs probably the best routes in the NFL. Just look at the growth of Josh Allen once he acquired Stephon Diggs in Buffalo. He also plays in a place where from this point forward, the weather's not all that great. I always kind of give a slight edge to guys who play outdoors rather than a dome. It's not easy, though. Josh Allen can throw it 80 yards right to your hands, and you get a long touchdown pass. But yeah, Diggs is sensational. It doesn't seem to ever drop a ball, runs great routes, and he's a guy I think he's going to come up big in big games. So I got Stephon Diggs at number 2.
And based on all of our unpredictability, I believe we both have the same guy at number 1. And when push comes to shove, the guy's on pace for over 2,000 yards to break the record. 17 games, I know, is the additional game, but it doesn't matter. He's gone from who a lot of people think is the best, if not one of the best quarterbacks in the league, to a guy that before the season, no one would have put him on this list, but he's produced all the same, and that's Tyreek Hill. you know, does he do everything that some of these other bigger receivers do? Absolutely not. But I don't think there's any more dynamic of a weapon at that position than Tyreek Hill. I mean, there's not a guy in this league that you can give the ball to the line of scrimmage and he's constantly a threat to go 56. That guy and his ability to get open and create mismatches, it has been phenomenal for Tua, and we've seen his progression and just the impact that Tyreek Hill has had on him. So, as much as I was thinking, oh, maybe he's not going to be the number one on the list. I could not have him as the top wide receiver on our list.
Yeah, we agree. He's number one. Look at the production. He's averaging 100 yards per game, which is phenomenal. And that's in games with Tua, games without Tua. He's been productive.
And this is when everyone knows he's getting the ball.
Right, exactly. I mean, he's got Jalen Waddle with him.
Oh, sure.
Probably like a wide receiver in his own right. I mean, he's outstanding. They've got two of them. You got Mike Gesicki, good offensive scheme. But the reason I put Tyreek Hill up there, number one, not just the numbers, is he's a force multiplier because of his ability to get deep. Mm-hmm. He opens up the field for everybody else. He has the same effect on a football field that Steph Curry has on a basketball court. Like if you're playing the Golden State Warriors, you're worrying about Steph Curry from half court in. And the same thing with Tyreek Hill. You're just like, well, we've got to be careful because this guy can just go over the top 70 yards. I don't know if Tua can reach him, but he can just beat us over the top, or he could take the bubble screen and go 70 yards. He runs really good, and he's sure-handed, and he's a big play guy, and it just impacts the entire offense. So yeah, Tyreek Hill to me is the number one wide receiver in the league. And yesterday on Twitter, I put out there that he's kind of a sneaky MVP candidate. He to me is the biggest difference in Miami, right, from last year. Isn't that by definition MVP? I don't think he's going to get any votes, but I just said consideration. And people were like, no, he can't be. You can't have a wide receiver MVP. I said, of course not, but consideration. Learn the word consideration.
We know that the MVP award, it's not the letter of the law based on what the name of the award is. And because I made this case back in 2020. Well, who had more of an impact on their team than Tom Brady? You know what I mean? Like you go from so like in I guess in theory, most valuable would be that, but we understand that it's not necessarily that. It's combined with basically the best quarterback and who produces the most because of the nature of the position. But I agree with you. I mean, his impact on Miami has changed kind of their trajectory. And again, I had one view of Tua coming into the season, and it's been improving. And it's getting harder to criticize his body of work so far. So yeah, there you have it. I think that's a pretty solid from both of us, although we differed greatly. Again, it kind of speaks to the state of the wide receiver position in general. But that's going to do it for us here today on a special Wednesday edition of FPC Radio Live. Be sure to tune in on Friday when we kind of break down all of week 9 and kind of give our picks for the upcoming week, because that's what we do every single Friday. So thank you everyone for tuning in, and we will talk to you soon.